Yes, I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Welcome to Texas10.com. I'm Steve.
And I'm Melissa, and we're the Howans, and we travel Texas.
We do, and generally we travel by car, but you can get around Texas other ways too.
You know, Texas is one hot state. In the summer, it gets really hot, and what do you think people do to cool off?
Well, they head to the water.
They head to the water.
All sorts of water. We have the Gulf.
That's true.
We have lakes.
And we have rivers. We have great rivers.
We have awesome rivers. And so at Texas 10 and Texas10.com, we like to talk about places, but things and just Texanness, if you will. And so one of the things we want to talk about today, and you can read more about it on Texas10.com or see pictures and whatnot at some of our social media channels, either at Facebook, it's Texas 10, and all the other social media places, it's at Texas 10 Podcast. We want to talk about Texas's rivers and how to make use of them.
Well, we've been making use of them for my whole life. I have taken time to go to the river. When we were teenagers, we would go to New Braunfels or San Marcos, and we'd get on the Guadalupe. There was a place called Camp Warneke.
Such a magical place.
Unfortunately, Camp Warneke is not really there anymore. You youngsters know it as the Schlitterbahn, but if you're our age, you remember Camp Warneke, and we would go and we would float the river and hit the rapids at Camp Warneke.
So Camp Warneke was an actual camp. Mm-hmm. There were cabins that you could stay at. They were pretty rustic.
We
stayed. I think we went to a formal once, which was pretty informal out of college, and stayed there. Obviously, we grew up in San Antonio, so we didn't have to spend the night to go to Camp Warneke. It was just 30 minutes north of San Antonio. And it was a spot on the Guadalupe River, right, as she said, right where Schlitterbahn in New Braunfels is now. And it was just a mecca for high schoolers, smaller than that, older than that. And one of the things that you did is there was sort of a quasi dam with an opening, and it forced a big river flow through it and sort of made a rapids out of that.
And you'd ride it, you'd have an inner tube, and you'd ride it, and then you grabbed this little wire and tried to pull yourself out, and it was thrilling. But riding the river, you would go and you would drive up, and there'd be these companies, and they are still there, and you park, and you get on a bus, and you get your inner tube. And nowadays, if you go and see them, you can get all kinds of things. You've got floating ice chests, and you link together, and you spend the entire day with your people floating the river.
Well, so the ice chest is sort of key to that, I think. And so I can't really think of a more relaxing Texas summer day than floating the Guadalupe or the Comal, or we'll talk about some of the others. And like Melissa said, now I will say it has gotten a little bit out of hand. The partying scene that goes on, the landowners, it's mostly privately held land on the rivers, and they can get a little tired, particularly if you do this. You should do it, but clean up.
Right.
All right. That ice chest is there to take the beer out of and put the empties back into. The second thing is you got to watch yourself. You are on a river. It is water, and you can't get too. Just pace yourself. That's all I'm saying.
What I will say too, though, floating the river it gives you create memories, is what I'm trying to say. In fact, we have some good memories of the river.
There's two that jump to my mind. Again, it was in New Braunfels or close to New Braunfels on the Guadalupe. There were two cliffs there, and we tried to measure them by doing how long does it take to get from point A to point B, and then doing whatever the formula is for that. And we estimated one's 33 feet, one's 45 feet above the river. And so those are tall things. And in high school, one of my good buddies, Lee Willis, he got a little turned over on a jump and hit it sideways and busted his eardrum. So that was not good. But my favorite was in college. We were there, and a fraternity brother of mine named Wayne Hollingsworth got up on the tall one. And Wayne was buff, okay?
Yes, he was.
And he was, okay, enough. And so he was standing up, and to the people stop and watch the dives or jumps or
and
whatever.
You rate 10, or that was a 5.
Well, Wayne took a little bit of time up there, and the people on the river figured he was chickening out because it's, like I said, it's a ways up there. And just when the catcalls got big enough, turns out he was a diver in high school, and he launched himself into a perfect gainer and a half, hit it like Greg Louganis. There was no water, and the river went crazy of people, applauding that. And so whenever I think of running the Guadalupe River, I think of Wayne Hollingsworth.
So you do create memories, you meet people, you have a great time. But the Comal and the Guadalupe aren't the only rivers in Texas. If you go further south, there's the Rio River, which is beautiful.
And if you talk about cooling off in the summer,
it's cold.
There is no better river than the Frio. I remember growing up, there's a lot of church camps along there. And so if a lot of people have gone to church camp around the Frio River. We were doing that with a Lutheran church that I attended. And a friend of mine, we were in junior high, about to go in high school. And we so wanted to be like the high school kids. We got up early. We were fishing in a canoe. And lo and behold, we had a moccasin, which is the one thing about rivers, but we had a moccasin drop into our boat. Well, Perry, luckily, thought faster than Steve, grabbed an oar, put the moccasin out. And we went back and showed the high school guys what studs we were. And
it was dead.
Right. And then that night, we climbed into our little 2-person tent, zipped it up 7 ways. Perry reached under his and yelled, "Snake." And if we would have thought for half a second, we would have realized the high school guys had put the dead snake in but we didn't realize that. And we couldn't get the zippers open. And eventually the whole tent came down before we actually got out. So those are the sort of things that get made in terms of memories on the river.
Well, I will tell you, explore Texas and explore the rivers.
Well, and so one thing I want to talk about in terms of memories, so we've given our memories. I want to give a shout out to one of our greatest authors and one of the best books about Texas you will ever read. John Graves wrote Goodbye to a River in the late 50s, early 60s. Is important to us because he was talking about the Brazos River, which runs right through our hometown of Waco. And the story was that in the name of progress, they were going to put 13 dams along the Brazos River, and it would cease to exist as it had for eons. Well, John Graves had grown up, and that was his country. And so he took one last river trip with his dog in a canoe, and he writes about the people and the history that was built into the land and the river, and it won all sorts of awards. It's sold to this day. I'm sure it's one of the best-selling books about Texas. And as a result of it, there was such an uproar that they cut the 13 dams down to 3, and we still have the mighty Brazos flowing through here all the way to College Station, all the way to the sea. So highly recommend that. And in terms of friends, his friend was his dog on that trip. But you talk about a memory. You can't get a better explanation of what rivers mean to us and obviously what they meant to John.
And that's one of our favorite memories, as a matter of fact, when on our trips, is going to Big Bend and canoeing down that river with our river guide.
Right. James, the river guide.
He was wonderful. And it was really special. It was towards the end of the season, and it was just the two of us and James. And so we learned a lot of history, a lot about the area. To canoe that part of the country, you see Mexico just on the other side. And there's many rivers that you can canoe, you can kayak, you can float. But take some time to explore the great outdoors of Texas and explore our rivers.
Right. And so, a lot of times lake life and Gulf life get the headlines when you talk about water. we're here today to talk about river life and give it its due. And whether you're a teenager at Camp Warnakee, whether you're John Graves, saving the Brazos River by yourself in your pen, or
you're a camper. If you go down to the hill country, I call that God's country. And we took our girls to camp every year. And one of the things that I loved is River Road outside of Kerrville and Hunt, Texas, and just driving along the river and seeing the beauty of God's creation and getting to grow up and do the things that we don't do every day. So
if you got a favorite river, let us know at texas10.com. Comment on here on the podcast or on one of our social media channels. We'd love to hear about your favorite river and what makes it so meaningful to you, some of your stories. Keep watching us here on the podcast. We appreciate your time. We hope we're going to keep bringing you great stories about Texas.
Join the adventure.
About you, and I love this land. Oh, it takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast plain, from the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade, I love this land. It takes my breath away.